For nearly 70 minutes, five-time world champions Brazil weren't playing like tournament favorites. They were playing like a team heading for one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history. One misplaced pass, one perfectly executed counterattack, one fearless underdog refusing to blink, and suddenly, Brazil's dream of a sixth World Cup was hanging by a thread. Inside Houston Stadium, thousands of Brazilian fans watched in disbelief as Japan, organized, fearless, and tactically brilliant, stood just minutes away from eliminating one of football's greatest nations. By the end of the night, Brazil would survive. But don't let the final score fool you. This wasn't a comfortable comeback. This was a warning, a reminder that even football's biggest giants can stand just inches away from disaster. So how did Japan push Brazil to the edge? What changed after halftime? And why will this match leave Brazilian fans relieved, but far from convinced? Let's break down one of the most dramatic matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Coming into this round of 32 clash, the expectations seemed straightforward. Brazil had topped their group after recovering from an opening draw, showcasing the depth and attacking quality expected from one of the tournament favorites. Under Carlo Ancelotti, there was growing confidence that this new-look Seleção had finally found the balance between Brazilian flair and European tactical discipline. Japan, meanwhile, arrived with far less global attention, yet anyone who had watched them closely knew this wasn't just another underdog. The Samurai Blue had quietly built a reputation for discipline, intelligence, and relentless work rate. Their defensive organization had frustrated opponents throughout the tournament, while their quick transitions punished even the smallest mistakes. On paper, Brazil had superior talent almost everywhere. On the pitch, none of that mattered, because Japan understood something many teams fail to recognize when facing Brazil. You don't beat Brazil by matching their talent. You beat them by denying them space. And for an entire first half, they did exactly that. From the opening whistle, Brazil controlled possession. The numbers would eventually show they finished with 62% of the ball and completed passes at an outstanding 92% accuracy. Normally, statistics like that tell the story of dominance. This time, they were misleading. Japan wanted Brazil to have possession. That was the trap. Instead of pressing recklessly, Japan settled into an incredibly compact defensive block. The midfield stayed narrow, the defensive line remained disciplined, and every central passing lane was crowded with blue shirts. Brazil found themselves circulating the ball from side to side, looking, waiting, searching for openings that simply weren't there. Every attack followed the same pattern: wide pass, cross into the box, clearance, reset, wide pass, cross, clearance. Brazil had possession, Japan had control. That's the difference. One team had the ball, the other dictated where the ball could go, and the longer the first half continued, the more frustration began creeping into Brazil's play. One of the biggest reasons Japan looked so comfortable came in midfield. Brazil's experienced partnership struggled whenever Japan transitioned from defense to attack. Casemiro, one of the game's most accomplished holding midfielders, found himself repeatedly dragged into uncomfortable situations. Lucas Paquetá also struggled to inject the creativity Brazil desperately needed through the middle. Japan recognized that weakness immediately. Rather than forcing complicated passing moves, they attacked directly whenever possession changed hands. The objective wasn't to dominate possession. It was to attack before Brazil's structure could recover. Simple, efficient, devastating. Every transition asked Brazil uncomfortable questions. Could their midfield recover quickly enough? Could their defenders handle runners charging through space? Could their experienced players match Japan's energy? For much of the first half, the answer was no. And then came the moment that changed everything. 29 minutes into the match, Brazil made the kind of mistake that becomes unforgettable in knockout football. Danilo attempted what looked like a routine infield pass. It wasn't. Kaishū Sano anticipated it instantly. He intercepted cleanly. Suddenly, Brazil's defensive shape disappeared. Sano surged forward with confidence, driving directly at the heart of Brazil's midfield. Casemiro couldn't slow him down, and instead of hesitating against one of football's biggest names, Sano trusted his instincts. From outside the box, he unleashed a precise low strike that flew beyond Alisson's reach and nestled into the bottom corner. Japan 1, Brazil 0. Houston fell silent. For Japanese supporters, it was a dream unfolding in real time. For Brazil, it felt like a nightmare. The favorites had dominated possession, yet they were behind. And for the first time in the tournament, genuine doubt began to spread through the Brazilian team. Sano's strike wasn't simply the result of individual brilliance. It exposed Brazil's biggest tactical weakness. Japan hadn't scored through sustained pressure. They scored by forcing exactly the mistake they wanted: Throughout the first half, Brazil kept trying to force play through crowded central areas before recycling possession back into wide positions. Japan patiently waited. They understood that if they remained compact long enough, frustration would eventually produce a careless pass. That's exactly what happened. Danilo's misplaced ball wasn't random. It was created by relentless tactical pressure. The moment Sano intercepted, Japan did something many opponents failed to do against Brazil. They attacked immediately. No hesitation, no unnecessary passes, no slowing the tempo, 3 or 4 quick movements, one clinical finish. Against elite teams, transition football often beats possession football. Japan demonstrated that lesson perfectly. As halftime approached, something unusual was happening. Brazil still controlled possession. They were still pushing numbers forward, but every attack looked increasingly predictable. Vinicius Jr. struggled to find space against Japan's disciplined shape. Matheus Cunha worked tirelessly, but rarely received the ball in dangerous positions. The crosses kept coming. Japan kept clearing them. Brazil attempted to stretch the defense. Japan calmly shifted together as one unit. Nothing felt chaotic. Nothing felt desperate. Everything about Japan's defensive performance suggested a team completely convinced by its plan. And perhaps most worrying for Brazil, the frustration was beginning to show. Every misplaced pass brought more urgency. Every blocked cross increased the pressure. Every passing minute brought Brazil closer to something almost unimaginable, an early World Cup exit. When the halftime whistle finally arrived, the scoreboard read, Brazil 0, Japan 1. For the neutral, it was one of the biggest surprises of the tournament. For Brazil, it was a crisis. Their midfield looked slow, their attacks looked repetitive, their experienced leaders looked rattled. Meanwhile, Japan walked toward the dressing room believing they were just 45 minutes away from making football history. But inside Brazil's dressing room, one of the greatest managers in football was preparing to make decisions that would completely transform the match. Those changes wouldn't just rescue Brazil, they would expose the tiny margins that separate heartbreak from glory in World Cup knockout football. And they would prove that sometimes championships are won not by the best first half, but by the smartest second. Here's part 2 of the script, continuing seamlessly from the halftime cliffhanger. As Brazil disappeared down the tunnel, the mood was completely different from the opening half hour. Possession meant nothing. Passing accuracy meant nothing. Brazil were losing. And Carlo Ancelotti knew that if the game continued in the same rhythm, Japan might complete one of the greatest World Cup upsets ever seen. Then came the first major decision. Lucas Paquetá was withdrawn through injury. Endrick was introduced. At first glance, it looked like a straightforward substitution. In reality, it was the beginning of a tactical transformation. Because Ancelotti didn't just change a player, he changed the entire structure of Brazil's attack. Brazil's first-half problem wasn't a lack of talent, it was a lack of variation. Japan had successfully funneled every attack toward the wings, where crosses became easy to defend. Ancelotti responded with 4 crucial adjustments: higher pressing intensity, faster vertical passing. Bruno Guimarães pushed into more advanced positions, Gabriel Martinelli drifting centrally instead of staying wide. Suddenly, Japan could no longer defend the same spaces. Instead of receiving the ball with their backs to goal, Brazil's attackers began receiving it between the lines. Instead of recycling possession endlessly, Brazil attacked forward much earlier, and most importantly, Japan started running backward. The opening minutes of the second half felt completely different. Brazil's tempo increased. The crowd became louder. Japan, who had looked so comfortable before the break, suddenly found themselves defending deeper and deeper. Then came a moment that could have broken Brazil completely. A cross arrived perfectly into the 6-yard box. Casemiro rose highest. From point-blank range, he should have scored. Instead, chaos unfolded. The header struck Takehiro Tomiyasu, then hit goalkeeper Zion Suzuki, then bounced back onto Tomiyasu on the goal line, and somehow, incredibly, stayed out. For a split second, it felt like fate was against Brazil. Casemiro buried his face in frustration. Japan survived. The score remained 1-0, and now the pressure became enormous. Because in knockout football, missed chances don't just disappear, they haunt you. Remember where Casemiro was 24 minutes earlier, beaten by Sano, blamed for the opening goal, on a yellow card. Many Brazilian fans expected him to be substituted. Ancelotti kept him on. 3 minutes after missing that sitter, Casemiro got another chance. Gabriel Martinelli delivered an excellent cross toward the far post. This time, Casemiro made no mistake. Powerful header, down into the net. Brazil 1-1 Japan. Houston erupted, and suddenly the narrative changed completely. The player who had contributed to Brazil's biggest problem had become the man who dragged them back into the match. That is the cruelty and beauty of knockout football. One moment can make you the villain, the next can make you the hero. If Casemiro's equalizer changed the momentum, what happened 2 minutes later nearly changed the result. Vinicius Jr. picked up the ball near midfield. He accelerated through the center, one defender beaten, another left behind, then a venomous finish toward the corner. It looked destined for the net. But Zion Suzuki produced something extraordinary. At full stretch, he got the slightest fingertip on the ball and pushed it onto the post. The stadium gasped. Vinicius stood in disbelief. Brazil thought they had completed the turnaround. Suzuki refused to allow it. That save kept Japan alive. Without it, Brazil probably win the game with half an hour remaining. Instead, the drama continued. As the second half progressed, Suzuki became the central figure of the match. Crosses flew into the box. Shots arrived from distance. Loose balls dropped dangerously. Again and again, the Japanese goalkeeper responded. By full time, he would finish with 5 saves, several of them crucial. What made his performance so impressive wasn't just the athleticism, it was the composure. In a knockout match against Brazil, with the crowd growing louder and the pressure mounting every minute, Suzuki never looked rattled. He caught what he could, punched what he had to, and kept giving Japan a chance. For long stretches, he looked capable of carrying them all the way to extra time. Then, in the 66th minute, Ancelotti made another key move. Gabriel Martinelli entered the match. This wasn't just about fresh legs. It was about changing the geometry of Brazil's attack. Martinelli immediately began making aggressive runs into central areas. Japan's defenders, who had spent much of the night holding a compact shape, suddenly had a new problem. Who tracks Martinelli? If they followed him inside, space opened for Vinicius. If they stayed narrow, Martinelli could receive between the lines. For the first time all night, Japan's defensive block began to stretch. This is where squad depth becomes decisive in World Cups. Brazil could introduce Endrick and Martinelli. Japan had already spent over an hour chasing, pressing, and defending with incredible discipline. The distances between their lines grew slightly larger. Clearances traveled shorter distances. Counterattacks became less frequent. Brazil sensed it. Bruno Guimarães pushed even higher. Gabriel stepped forward with the ball. Marquinhos kept Brazil camped inside Japan's half. The statistics began reflecting the momentum shift. By the end of the match, Japan would finish with only 38% possession and just 5 total shots. For the final half hour, they were surviving rather than competing. As the clock ticked into the final 10 minutes, a strange tension settled over the stadium. Brazil were dominating, yet they couldn't find the winner. Japan were exhausted, yet they kept blocking, clearing, and scrambling. Every Brazilian attack felt dangerous. Every Japanese clearance felt heroic. And with each passing minute, the possibility of extra time grew stronger. For Japan, extra time would have been a victory in itself. For Brazil, it would have felt like a failure. Then the fourth official raised the board. Stoppage time, 6 more minutes. 6 minutes separating Japan from history. 6 minutes separating Brazil from humiliation. What happened next would break one nation's heart and rescue another from the edge of a World Cup disaster. Because after surviving wave after wave of Brazilian pressure, Japan were about to make the one mistake they simply could not afford. And Bruno Guimarães was waiting for it. 90 minutes had come and gone. Japan had defended with extraordinary discipline. They had frustrated one of the greatest football nations on earth. They had survived wave after wave of pressure. The scoreboard still showed 1-1. Extra time felt inevitable. For Japan, simply reaching another 30 minutes would have been a reward for one of the finest defensive performances of the tournament. For Brazil, it would have raised uncomfortable questions. How could a team with 62% possession, 20 shots, and countless attacking stars still be unable to put Japan away? But knockout football doesn't care about what feels deserved. It only punishes mistakes. And after defending almost perfectly for more than 95 minutes, Japan made one. Deep into stoppage time, Japan attempted to play out from the edge of their own penalty area. Until that point, they had remained calm under pressure. This time, the pass never reached its target. Brazil's high press, which Ancelotti had demanded throughout the second half, finally produced exactly what it was designed to create: a turnover in the most dangerous area of the pitch. Bruno Guimarães reacted first. That reaction tells you everything about elite midfielders. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He lifted his head for a split second and immediately saw Gabriel Martinelli making the run. The pass was perfectly weighted, not too early, not too late. Martinelli collected it in stride. One quick touch shifted the ball onto his stronger foot. Another touch opened the angle. Then came the finish. Low, controlled. Off the inside of the post, beyond Zion Suzuki. Brazil 2, Japan 1. Houston exploded. Only moments earlier, anxiety had filled the stadium. Now it was pure emotion. Brazil's bench emptied onto the pitch. Martinelli sprinted toward the corner flag. Bruno Guimarães punched the air in celebration. Carlo Ancelotti remained remarkably composed, almost as if he had trusted that this moment would eventually arrive. At the other end of the pitch, everything stopped. Japanese players stood frozen. Some stared at the ground. Others looked toward the giant screen, hoping somehow the goal wouldn't count. But there was no escape. After defending brilliantly for almost the entire match, their World Cup dream had slipped away in seconds. Few defeats hurt more than this. Japan weren't outplayed from start to finish. They weren't overwhelmed. They weren't lucky to still be in the game for long periods. They executed their plan almost perfectly. They forced Brazil into uncomfortable positions. They exposed weaknesses in midfield. They scored first. They defended with courage. Their goalkeeper produced one of the finest individual performances of the tournament. And still, they lost. That's the brutal reality of knockout football. Sometimes 95 minutes of excellence are undone by 5 seconds of imperfection. Martinelli scored the winner, but the man who quietly controlled Brazil's comeback was Bruno Guimarães, officially named Man of the Match. His influence extended far beyond the assist. Throughout the second half, he constantly received the ball under pressure. He accelerated Brazil's attacks instead of slowing them. He carried possession through midfield. He pressed aggressively after losing the ball, and when the decisive moment arrived, he recognized it faster than everyone else. Great players don't just make brilliant passes, they recognize brilliant opportunities before anyone else does. Bruno did exactly that. There is another player this match should never forget. Zion Suzuki. Statistics alone don't tell the full story. 5 saves, 1 fingertip stop against Vinicius Jr. that may become one of the defining saves of this World Cup. Confident claims under pressure, excellent positioning, calm distribution. He gave Japan every chance to reach extra time. Even on Martinelli's winner, Suzuki almost rescued his team again. He managed to get a hand to the shot. The ball struck the inside of the post. For 1 agonizing second, it looked as though fortune might save Japan once more. Instead, the ball rolled across the line. Sometimes goalkeepers do everything right. Football still refuses to reward them. Brazil celebrated wildly, and they had every reason to. They survived. They advanced. Their dream of a 6th World Cup remained alive. But beneath the celebrations lies an important truth. Brazil were far closer to elimination than the final score suggests. The statistics appear convincing. 20 shots, 7 on target, 62% possession, yet numbers alone hide what actually happened. For almost an hour, Brazil struggled to solve Japan's compact shape. Their attacks became predictable. Their midfield lacked mobility. Danilo's mistake handed Japan belief. Casemiro was repeatedly exposed before redeeming himself. Against stronger opponents later in the tournament, those same problems may prove impossible to recover from. This victory should give Brazil confidence. It should also give them caution. Because future opponents will study this match carefully. They now have a blueprint. Stay compact. Protect the center. Force Brazil wide. Attack quickly after turnovers. Japan showed that Brazil can be made uncomfortable. The next opponent will surely try to do the same. So why did Brazil eventually survive? Not because Japan suddenly collapsed, not because Brazil suddenly became unstoppable. They survived because elite tournament teams possess qualities that statistics rarely capture: patience, experience, belief, and perhaps most importantly, depth. When the game demanded fresh energy, Brazil introduced Endrick. When the defense began tiring, Martinelli arrived. When pressure increased, Bruno Guimarães became more influential. Above them all stood Carlo Ancelotti. His halftime adjustments increased the pressing intensity, created more vertical attacks, and gradually forced Japan deeper into their own half. He didn't panic while trailing. He trusted his players. And over 96 minutes, those small tactical changes slowly tilted the match in Brazil's favor. Championship teams don't always dominate. Sometimes they simply refuse to lose. Brazil now march into the round of 16, where an even tougher challenge awaits. Whether they face Norway or Ivory Coast, one thing is certain: those opponents will have watched this match very closely. They now know Brazil can be pressed. They know Brazil can struggle against disciplined defensive blocks. But they also know something equally dangerous. Brazil never stop believing. Not when they're behind. Not when time is running out. Not when the entire football world begins doubting them. That resilience may become their greatest weapon as the tournament progresses. Years from now, Brazilian supporters will remember this as the night their World Cup campaign nearly ended before it truly began. Japanese supporters will remember it for a very different reason. As the final whistle sounded, players in blue fell to the turf. Some buried their faces in the grass, others fought back tears. They had come within minutes of delivering the greatest knockout victory in their country's football history. Instead, they left Houston with only heartbreak. Football can be wonderfully unfair. It can reward persistence. It can punish a single lapse in concentration. And on this unforgettable night in Houston, Brazil escaped by inches. Japan left with pride, but empty-handed. Sometimes that's the cruelest ending the World Cup can write. But if Brazil are to lift a sixth World Cup trophy, this dramatic escape may be remembered not as the night they nearly went home, but as the night champions discovered how close they came to losing everything.